Scientists around the world have long pondered the potential benefits of treating mental illnesses with psychedelic drugs. But with psychedelic substances banned in so many countries, the lack of real-world data has left the field largely unexplored. Now, Australia has become the first country to allow psychiatrists to prescribe certain substances, opening the door for a potential medical breakthrough.
A new era in mental health treatment. Magic mushrooms and ecstasy now available for prescription use in Australia. Psychedelic therapy offers new hope for those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and depression.
You can use MDMA for people who have tried other medications for PTSD, and it's not been successful, or they're having difficulty with that treatment. So we'll use that for PTSD. Whereas psilocybin is going to be used for people who have been on antidepressants, say, or other traditional medications, and they haven't worked.
For decades, psychedelics were outlawed by governments and shunned in scientific communities. But now their power is being rediscovered. MDMA and psilocybin can reset brain functions and break old thought patterns. But critics say Australia's decision to legalize them is premature and the therapy could backfire.
There are some individuals that go through their clinical trials, do not benefit, and not only don't benefit, their symptoms get worse. There are some individuals that this happens to. This is an expensive intervention, and we don't want to make people worse.
Treatments could cost upwards of 10,000 Australian dollars per patient. And with the bill not covered by the state, euphoria over the drug breakthrough could be short-lived.
Let's get into this with Derek Williams from DW Science. Welcome, Derek. So how will these drugs be used then therapeutically?
Well, as we just heard, in the future, MDMA, which is also a name for ecstasy, can be used for post-traumatic stress disorder, and psilocybin can be used for treatment-resistant depression. Now, these are both conditions for which there are no really effective treatments, but the experts emphasize over and over that the drug is actually sort of it's only the means to an end, and they emphasize that the therapy is actually a big part of what's going on, sort of 40 hours of therapy before, during, and after this psychedelic experience that the patients have, sometimes more than once. And they're emphasizing that that is actually what is going to be helping the people. Really, it's a tool that kind of taps into the patient's consciousness, and it's not one that's undisputed. There are also experts out there that say it's far too early to have made this decision.
I suppose that's the whole point of running tests and trials, to get better data. And so what do we know then about the way that this substance works?
Well, actually, not really a lot. The best guess that we have is that it actually is tapping into neuroplasticity, that it's closing these kind of feedback loops, these neural feedback loops in your brain that don't ordinarily get closed. It's making these connections that don't ordinarily get made, which could account for this sort of feeling of revelation that a lot of patients have described. I've written down what a couple of experts have said. One said that more parts of the brain are talking to more parts of the brain, and another one said that the drugs foster greater connections between different regions of the brain in depressed people, freeing them up from long-held patterns of rumination and excessive self-focus. Now, that sounds like a good thing, but it's not necessarily for everyone. Another one said it's not for everybody. We need to work out who the people are that are going to have bad experiences through this therapy and not recommend it. And she said that her work indicates that 10 to 20% of trial participants can have a really terrible time with drugs like this. So looking at that from the flip side, that obviously means that 80 to 90% of the people who are having this kind of therapy are having positive or at least neutral experiences, but there's still a lot to learn.
We've been hearing about the potential, these substances being potentially legalized around the world for quite a while now. Is this decision from Australia, is that likely to open the floodgates elsewhere?
Well, I think on the one hand, it's a question of obviously of the effectiveness, which we've been talking about, but it's also a question definitely of cost. Now, the Australian authorities, the Medicare system there is not going to be paying for this. And from the best, you're getting cost estimates for this particular kind of treatment between 15 and 30,000 Australian dollars. So call it $10,000 to $20,000 US. Now that's pretty pricey and pretty expensive for people to have to pay for on their own. So I think that that is definitely longer term going to be a big issue that's going to have to be addressed. Now, there are other countries that are obviously looking at this: Israel, Switzerland, Canada, the U.S., also particular states in the U.S., Oregon, at looking at the legalization of these particular drugs for this particular, for these particular conditions. But it's still very, very early days, and there's still a lot of data that we need to track down, particularly in terms of the long-term effects. When somebody has had this kind of treatment, how long do the effects last?
Right. Thanks for that, Derek. Derek Williams from DW Science.